I'm working on some garden screening. Now one section of this is going to be a foldable gate. I've gone ahead and I've made the framework for it all already. Now it's time to do the sculptural section. Now the first part of that sculptural section I want to work on is taking a sheet of flat steel and turning it into a woodland fern. To do these ferns, I need to work out roughly how I'm going to cut it out. So a rough shape of a fern frond is the triangle. And then coming off of that is each of the individual pieces. Now each individual piece is something like this, getting smaller and smaller as it gets to the end. Now what I need to do is take that rough idea, design it up on the computer so that's ready to cut out on the CNC Plasma. Gone ahead and done the design for the leaves for the ferns. So you can see as you're working your way up, gradually getting smaller and smaller, and then a separate piece for the top. I just don't think it's going to work. Keep getting smaller. I want the last piece to curve over really nicely, and when it's welded onto a metal bar, it's just not going to work. So if you just imagine there's a metal bar coming down the middle of that, all of those will be welded to it, and then they can all be shaped individually to make sure everything looks right. Let's get it cut.
The CNC Plasma Cutter is one of the best things I've ever bought. After a really successful exhibition back in 2017, actually the first exhibition that ever went really well, I was in a position to invest the money I'd made into something, and the CNC Plasma Cutter seemed like a no-brainer. It was a good chunk of money, but it's easily paid for itself multiple times since, and I'd say I use it pretty much every single day. It would be possible to make these with an angle grinder, but the time saved doing it this way is massive for me. The only downside with smaller pieces like this is there's a lot of dross on the back from the plasma. That has to be cleaned off of every single piece. Now for the stem of the ferns, I would ideally have a piece of tapered bar, but the best way I've found to get a similar effect is to have a section of thinner bar welded to thicker bar, then grinding down the weld so it tapers down into the smaller bar. So for this it's a 6mm round bar down to a 4mm round bar. When it comes to welding the individual leaves onto the stem, I found the best way is to tack weld them on the top and then flip the whole thing over and weld it again from the other side. I'm going to need to manipulate each of them quite a lot to get the right shape, so it needs to be strong. Oh, and making sure the camera isn't in focus is definitely important as well. It's starting to resemble the basic shape of a fern, but each leaf now needs a line down the middle of it to give it some more detail. I am fully aware of how bad it looks using a slitting disc on the angle grinder that close to my finger, but I've done this lots of times and there's no actual force being put onto the angle grinder. It's literally just the weight of the grinder to cut the score line into the metal. The fun part of this sculpture is transforming each leaf with the oxypropane torch, manipulating each leaf into the shape it needs to be. You can actually see when the heat is applied onto the metal, how much it moves around on its own just from the heat. It occurred to me the other day that seeing metal as malleable and getting the chance to move metal around like it's a flexible material is something that I do nearly every day. But for the vast majority of people, they will never even see metal when it's red hot in real life, let alone get the chance to experiment with how it can move. I guess I'm pretty lucky to experience it in that way. I always wonder when I'm doing a piece like this, when I'm having to heat an area up, put the torch down, manipulate it, pick it up, heat the next bit, whether I might be better off getting a forge, so I could just heat the entire piece. But in my mind I think it'd probably cool down too quickly in between heats, and I spend ages waiting for it all to heat up again. If you've got more experience in that kind of thing, please drop me a comment and let me know whether I'd be better off with a forge or carrying on as I am with the oxypropane torch.
That's the shape of the fern roughed out with the blowtorch on each of the individual leaves, giving it the curve upwards and around. So what I need to do now is put a bit more shape into the actual stem of it, because it kind of comes up and curves round. Once I've shaped all of that and I'm happy with it, I'm going to tweak all the leaves pointed upwards slightly so it looks a bit more natural. Make a load more of them, then I can get it onto the gate and we'll see what it looks like. When you're bending something like this and you want a gentle curve, you don't want any heat on it, so bend it cold. It's only 6mm round bars, it's nice and easy to manipulate. If you do it with a blowtorch on there, you end up with a weak spot. So obviously everything bends just where the heat is. If you do it cold, then it'll bend nice and even. Bit more shape to it. I'm going to tweak all of that once it's on the actual gates, but what I want to do now is take each of the leaves and bend them up, just ever so slightly, like that, all the way up through. That's going to bring it to life. It's really going to make it look more natural. There we are, pretty happy with that. I'm going to make a load more of them and I'll come back once I've done that. Hopefully you've enjoyed watching how I made these. If you have, leave a like, subscribe, comment. That's pretty much done for now. I think I'm probably going to add a couple more fronds onto it. But I'm really happy with how these came out, with a nice curve on the end. Everything can still be moved around as I get further on with the design. Now I've got the whole thing that needs filling in. The next section is going to be some foxgloves coming up somewhere around about there, up to that kind of height. That is going to be the next video. And making some foxgloves out of bicycle frames. See you in the next one.